to Film Foundations, the collaborative show between Someone's Favorite Productions and Weirding Way Media. I am one of your co-hosts, Ryan Verrill from the Disconnected and Someone's Favorite Productions.
And I am Chris Tashu, your other co-host from Weirding Way Media, the Culture Cast, and other terrible opinions about movies on the internet.
On this show, we always ask and answer 4 questions about a given topic that is surrounding either a director, franchise, microgenre, or, like our topic today, an actor. And this one is an interesting one because I love these types of episodes where it is the job of our guest today to entice us to broaden our horizons on film, to encourage all of us to travel down film tangents and side roads that we may have never traveled down before, because I've never even seen a single movie with the actor we're discussing today. We're discussing Dylan O'Brien, but my favorite part is I get to introduce my dear friend Billy Ray Brewton, who is founder of the Make Believe Film Festival in Seattle. He was the host of the Incinerator podcast, of the Movie Mixtapes podcast. He is a frequent guest on Screen Drafts and filmmaker and all kinds of other stuff that I could just completely go on and on about. And he'd probably love that. But Billy Ray, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Brian. Brian, is it? Yes, thank you, Brian, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Brian and Chris, right? Is that you remember my name, but you just forgot his name? You've known him for how long now?
How long has it been? 8, 9, 20 years?
I guess the other part that I should have led with, too, Billy Ray is a collaborative partner in Someone's Favorite Productions. He's done some special features on some of our discs with us, and eager for many more. He's currently working on one right now I can't wait to see. And yeah, Billy Ray's amazing.
Oh, I don't know about amazing. Let's go with sufficient.
Well, it looks like you're dabbling in finger painting, as I can see in that.
I don't know who created this piece of art behind me. It was inherited. I was grandfathered into this artwork when I took this job. And every time I walk in, I'm like, can we do better? Can we do better than this?
Someone was trying their hand at calligraphy is what it looks like. They're just, a couple zeros, a 7.
Like, I raise money for an organization that supports children and stuff, and so I was like, "Is this just like a piece?" Yeah, I was literally like, "Is this just a piece of artwork a child did?" But I was like, they were like, "No, we bought this artwork." I'm like,
and I still have the job, right?
Every time I walk in and I sit down, I kind of hit it with my chair, hoping one day it's just going to fall, and I have an excuse to not have it behind me anymore.
Oh no, look what happened on accident.
Oh, I'm like Steve Wynn and I put my foot through it. What a shame.
Be careful there. Steve Wynn donates a lot of money to my organization.
Well,
a lot of our stuff is funded by the Wynn Foundation. Thank you, Steve, and all of your family for the wonderful work that you do.
What a name to mention out of nowhere for you to go, hold on a second now.
I know.
I can only think of one rich person who put their foot through a $1 million painting, and it's Steve Wynn. So
I can throw a rock and hit the Wynn building. It's literally right down the way.
Amazing.
But yes, glad we got off on that Steve Wynn tangent.
Speaking of tangents, Dylan O'Brien. I know nothing about Dylan O'Brien. Why do you love Dylan O'Brien, Billy Ray?
That's a fascinating question. And it's a question that I have waxed poetically on our friends at the B-Side podcast, in which I was on there to also discuss Dylan O'Brien, albeit in a different sort of way. So maybe the best way is to start with sort of my history with Mr. O'Brien. And that kind of goes back to Teen Wolf. I am a sucker. Let's be clear so everybody can know how sad it is. I am a 42-year-old man who is still moderately obsessed with teen shows, like teen dramas. For me, it started all the way back with Beverly Hills 90210, and then that segued into Dawson's Creek, and then that segued into Gossip Girl and Friday Night Lights and the OC. And so Teen Wolf was one of those for me. And I think just out of the gate, he just kind of stood out as the cream of the crop of that show. And it was quite clear that it was a show of a lot of quote unquote sort of soap opera-esque actors. And then you had the one actor who was legitimately giving a performance and giving a full performance. And so that's kind of where I first became familiar with him as a performer. And I've honestly just kind of followed him ever since. And it's been interesting to see where his career has gone, how he's kind of slowly been building up this kind of resume as a leading man in an interesting way, but also doing these interesting character roles. And I just think he's a really great actor. Like whether it's comedy or drama, he always finds that right balance. I mean, look, it doesn't hurt that he's easy on the eyes. That's never a hurtful thing. But it just making really interesting career choices. And I think someone that in another 10 years is going to be like headlining a lot of movies.
So I may want to get caught up then. Speaking of him being easy on the eyes, I had somebody describe his newest movie, Ponyboi, to me. Have you seen that one yet?
I have seen Ponyboi. I saw it at Sundance this year.
That's what I thought. I'm sure we'll get into that one a little bit later. Before we dive super deep onto Dylan O'Brien, why don't you just explain to the audience a little more about yourself, things you do, things that you might want to hype up or give some indication on? Because I didn't even bring up like Scripts Gone Wild. You do kind of everything.
I do a lot of different things, too many things, and I've had to scale back lately, which is why you are not going to hear me sort of podcasting anymore on my own because it just became too much to have to wrangle, unfortunately. But yeah, I've got a lot of other stuff. So I run a film festival in Seattle called Make Believe Seattle, which is a sort of a redevised idea of what a genre festival should be. And we just ran in March, our second year, was very successful. And we're already starting to plan for year 3. So if you live in the Seattle area or you want to make a trip to Seattle, we got a fun few days in March with some really batshit stuff that I'm sure will enjoy. I also run an event series here in Los Angeles called Scripts Gone Wild, where we basically assemble a bunch of celebrities together. We read a popular film script, but it's also a drinking game. And so anytime they flub a line, miss a cue, they're penalized. They have to take a drink. Everybody gets wonderfully wasted for charity. And we're working on a pretty big read for July with some pretty heavy hitters that we can't quite announce yet, but we're working on some fun stuff there. You know, we've had everybody from like Joel McHale and Perez Hilton and like a lot of random people. It's just a really fun excuse to get friends and new friends together, drink and raise money for a good cause. And again, I am the eternal heel on the Screen Drafts podcast, where I realized recently that I'm going to be on 5 times in the rest of the year, which is overwhelming me at the moment when I realize just how much people are going to be hearing my voice. So if you were worried about me dropping my podcast, rest assured, you're going to get at least 40 hours of Billy Ray content on Screen Drafts for the rest of the year.
Screen Drafts is amazing. And the history that you have built with them, I love that there's this sanction of the fan base that will either go to bat and defend every single thing you do, or the other one will go, oh, why is he here? Well,
and so people, and this is an exclusive. So if people want to know what's coming up, you can hear me on the Gina Davis draft that I'm doing with Drea Clark for the Bentonville Film Festival. We are hoping Gina is going to stop by for that. I'll be doing the Michael Crichton Super Draft with Clay and Darren Navarro. I will be doing my annual Halloween draft with Kyle Anderson, which I'm not sure what we're going to be drafting yet with that one. But then I'm also going to be doing a couple of Patreon drafts. We're doing a Legends draft on TV shows. And then we are also doing a 1994 draft as well on there. Nice. So a lot of random stuff coming up, and not a lot of horror, which I like. I feel like pigeonholed a bit in the horror genre, which I adore, but is far from my only area of enjoyment. So, yeah. And
today's topic.
And some other podcast appearances too. Like I'm going to be on the Kingcast podcast coming up. I'm going to be on a couple others. So I think the Almost Major podcast is coming up as well. So a few other things. You'll hear me. I ain't going anywhere.
I'm recording with Almost Major soon myself, actually.
Yep. I don't remember what I'm doing now. I think it's Critters and Critters 2.
Nice.
Yeah, all the critters. All them little critters.
All the critters. All the critters.
That's what it should be. All them critters. All the time. All critter network. ACN. All critters all the time.
I'm from Alabama. I'm not unfamiliar with that word. It's more Texas in origin, but we use it in the South.
That's right. That's where I was raised, was North Texas, where all them critters are running around.
We in the South, we refer to critters as genital warts.
I just like critters spelled URZ at the end.
Critters. Like critters. Like what's going on over there? I got some critters rustling around my drawers.
All them little critters. You got critters up in
This
the
is
attic?
not the tangent we needed to go on.
Seeing which one of us can get more southern with saying critters.
I don't know why it took us to pubic lice. I'll never know that. So,
I was about to say, like, you just destroyed the idea of going to Texas Roadhouse and ordering the chicken critters. That is now a thing that I will never do because all I can think of is chicken critter lice on my pubic region. That's on you. That's on you, Billy Ray Brewton.
That's pretty foul.
Yeah, makes me crack up when I hear it, though.
Oh God, this is going to haunt me in 10 years. When I'm running for public office.
Oh, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just found out that Billy Ray Brewton, who's running for mayor of the city, talked about critters' genital lice.
Oh, and you know what? I will, speaking of genital lice, no.
Great transition.
The other thing I will promote, since I'm not podcasting anymore, really, myself, I've decided, to start writing more and things like that. So I do still have, if folks do or like, I like what you're doing, Billy Ray, and I want to support you, don't feel like you have to. I'm fine. I don't need your money. But if you want to come and support and check out some exclusive writings and things like that, you can go to Billy Ray is Right on the Patreon. Which is something that, of course, sprung from the Screen Drafts podcast. Someone even made a limited run of buttons that say Billy Ray is Right. I still have mine. And Billy Ray is Right on Patreon. I'll be dropping probably one or two little reviews and stuff a week. Nothing huge. There's one level to sign up at. It's not expensive. It's really, again, like, I don't need your money. It's just, I can't create for nothing anymore. I'm too old.
Let's go from that straight into Dylan O'Brien. You talked about your history with the Teen Wolf.
There was a time that I would have loved to have gone straight into Dylan O'Brien, but those times have passed.
Wait, are you going to say you're past that now?
Oh, no, I am. It's like with everybody, it segued from like a movie crush into just like, oh, I just appreciate you as a talent. So my tastes have changed. What can I say, Ryan?
Well, speaking of Dylan O'Brien, come on in. No, I'm just kidding.
Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that have been something?
Never mind. I'm not going to
say his name 3 times and he appears like Beetlejuice. Is that what you're saying?
Oh my God. Let's give it a no. Okay.
Right. Let's see if that happens.
You talked about Teen Wolf. Anything you'd like to share on his history in film before we start diving into our questions?
Yeah, I mean, and this is more just, I guess, observations than anything else, because, I mean, Teen Wolf started in 2011. So that's really when he comes on the map. Before that, he was primarily known, I believe, for like YouTube videos. He had done a few like comedic YouTube videos, which weren't like huge by today's standards, but by like 2011 standards, did pretty well. They were cute, fun little things that any teenager would probably do. But Teen Wolf was certainly the first break. And, what really kind of thrust him into the mainstream was the Maze Runner franchise. That was back when we were getting these YA adaptations nonstop, like Twilight and Hunger Games. And this was one of them. And honestly, for my money, probably the most consistent of all of them. Like, I have a fondness for all 3 of these films. I think they're all directed by Wes Ball, who's a Florida State filmmaker. He's actually directing the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes movie that's coming out pretty soon. And so this was his kind of feature film debut. I mean, he jumped out of the gate doing a fucking Maze Runner movie. And so these are what kind of put him on the map. And what's been interesting since then is just watching how he's like, he's consciously trying to not get pigeonholed, right? Like, because if you saw him from Teen Wolf, you saw him as this kind of like lanky, geeky sort of guy who sort of blossomed into this like, pseudo hunk on the show, right? And so his career has kind of taken an interesting route too, because, he follows those films up with like, he does the action lead in American Assassin. He goes for he does the quirky sci-fi lead in Love and Monsters. Like, he's doing all these like really fun bit parts. And what we'll get to later in talking about him is one of these trajectories. And now he's playing Dan Aykroyd in the SNL movie. So it's like he's really making interesting choices. He's clearly kind of like pushing for that leading man status, and he's done it a few times already, I think successfully. But yeah, no, it's an interesting career. I always like it when younger actors who maybe you think they're headed for this certain thing kind of just flip the script on you and are like,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to do for this other thing too. Like, I'm going to make these other choices. And that's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Chris, we didn't ask you. Have you seen many or any of his films?
I have seen one. And that will be my answer when you ask me, because that's the only thing I can answer. We were joking about this before we started recording, that I thought that Dylan O'Brien was Dylan Baker, which is not the case. If it had been Dylan Baker, there would be theoretically more movies to answer to, because Dylan Baker's been working for a much longer time.
Oh, yeah.
What's interesting about Dylan O'Brien, I mean, other than the one movie that I've seen of his that will be my answer for one of the questions, I guess the other thing that I knew about Dylan O'Brien, and again, you already know this, Billy Ray Brewton, but our audience may not, Dylan O'Brien almost died while making the Maze Runners movies, to the point of getting essentially almost Mark Hamill of it all. He had to have his face reconstructed, which is the exact same thing that happened to Mark Hamill in the early 80s with Mark Hamill, and then with Dylan O'Brien, it was on the second to last, if not the last Maze Runner movie?
It was the last Maze Runner. They ended up having to pause shooting for like a year,
right,
just for him to even get back into ability to. Yeah, it was a pretty bad accident. Like it was one of those where like clearly was just like inches away from being gone.
Dead. Yeah,
being absolutely dead.
Yeah,
and you can tell, and I don't want to get into this because I hate talking about these sorts of things, but you can certainly tell that there's been a slight change to his facial structure, like not in like that big like Zac Efron way where it's like you're like, oh, you look very different now. It can, and what's great about whoever did that work on Dylan O'Brien is that it could also just be easily be someone being like, oh, you've just aged into it, right?
Right.
And but yeah, very happy that the death cure did not turn out to be that for him.
Yeah. That's the thing I remember about him, is like hearing about that. And again, like that is such an anomaly, because those kinds of things tend to not happen for good reason on set. But again, like that's just one of those high profile cases of like, holy shit, like one of the main actor in your franchise just almost ate shit and died. Like, that's absolutely insane. Yeah, like I said, the movie I saw of his and that kind of piece of information is all I know about Dylan O'Brien. And yeah, the thing about SNL in 1975, which sounds crazy, but
it says on here. Yeah, he was in a harness on top of a moving vehicle when he was unexpectedly pulled off the vehicle and hit by another vehicle.
Good gosh.
And yeah, so like, I mean, it's one of those Jeremy Renner things. Like, I don't know how you're alive, but thank goodness you are.
Right. Yeah, because he got hit in the face. Like,
it destroyed the entire right side of his face.
Which is just, again, like if you're an actor, that's the thing you're so concerned about is, the money maker, as they would say. So,
but whoever did it did a great job, because
it's hard to tell.
Noticeable. It's not.
No, it is. Yeah, like to even mention Mark Hamill, like Mark Hamill's more noticeable than Dylan O'Brien is in terms of like the reconstructive surgery. But I'm interested to see and excited to see what movies you're going to pick and kind of giving us an idea of where to go, because the one movie of his that I've seen, again, like I don't know if it's a good or bad starting place. So I'm excited to see what your answers to the questions are.
Sure, I'm excited.
Well, then let's dive right in then. Billy Ray, what is the foundational title for Dylan O'Brien that you think everybody, if they'd never seen a single one like myself, what do you think is the one that would introduce them best to his oeuvre?
That's the hardest question, right? I will say, and I'm going to answer these for every question, if we were talking about Dylan Baker.
Yeah, please give me the Dylan Baker episode at the same time. Thank you.
I am. I'd already decided I was going to do that. If we are talking about Dylan Baker,
thank you.
It would be Todd Solondz's Happiness as the foundational title. I think that is the title of all of Dylan Baker's works, where it sums up who he is an actor. Like, it shows you what he can do, but it also shows you the types of projects he chooses and how he really does not give a fuck about like what is sent his way as long as it's a good script. And for folks who don't know, he does play a pedophile in that movie, and an ardent pedophile that they don't try to like shy away from. But we're not here to talk about Dylan Baker until the next question. So happiness is the answer for Dylan Baker. For Dylan O'Brien, I'm going to go with what I think is my favorite Dylan O'Brien film. It just happens to be my favorite film. It's not one of his first films, but it is Love and Monsters from 2020. And this film came out during the pandemic when we were only seeing movies at drive-ins. It suffered because of that. Like, had it been released at a normal time in life, I think it would have done really, really well. And but it's about this. Dylan O'Brien plays a character named Joel. Basically, what has happened is there's been this apocalyptic thing where I think it's a meteor hits, or it's something to do with an asteroid or something hits, and all of these reptiles and amphibians become enormous. And so these monsters have taken over the planet. People are now living underground, and Joel, this character, decides that he's going to leave the underground bunker where he's at and go on this trip to find the girl that he was in love with and that he was obsessed with before the world went to shit. And so it's kind of about his journey. There are some just staggeringly beautiful images in this film, and some really emotional stuff. It's a great blend of like drama and comedy and romance, and there's some crazy sci-fi stuff. Michael Rooker is in this in a great supporting role. It's just a really well thought out movie. Now, it's written by a buddy of mine, Brian Duffield, and directed by a guy named Michael Matthews. And yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. I wish it would have gotten better, more attention and better traction when it did come out in 2020. But it's one that people are discovering as the years go by. And I would love to see it become a cult classic.
Speaking of Brian Duffield, Ryan, you and I talked about a Brian Duffield movie last year.
We did, yeah. And
so it had to have been Underwater or Spontaneous or one of the Babysitter movies.
No One Will Save You is a Brian Duffield movie.
That. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, that. Oh, yeah, that movie that came out on Hulu.
that Hulu movie.
I love Spontaneous. That's my favorite from him.
Yeah. It's really good. But yeah, no, I think this is a great gateway film for him because I think it showcases his evolution into sort of like leading man, but also a lot of this role harkens back to his Teen Wolf stuff, right? Like the energy that he's bringing to this is very much like he brought to the Styles character in Teen Wolf, because Dylan O'Brien's really good at the whole charming, dorky, a little awkward thing, while also looking like he looks. And so he's able to pull that off. And this is a good example of that. It kind of shows you, it's a good blend of early Dylan O'Brien and later Dylan O'Brien, I think.
Yeah, this one, I swear, it had a pretty big response from the people that saw it, but the hard part is not many saw it.
Oh, no, look, it made $1.1 million at the box office.
Jesus.
It made $1.1 million because it literally came out. It was released October of 2020. So we're talking less than a year into the pandemic. No one was going to movies except at the drive-thru. And this was the period of time when you had movies being number one at the box office that were fucking independent IFC movies, right. The Wretched that was number one at the box office because it made $100,000, right? What an interesting time to be alive that was. And this movie just completely fell victim to that. And it so deserved better. I don't know that it would have been a hit when it came out, but it certainly would have done better than $1.1 million. Probably would have at least made its $30 million budget back. And it's also a bummer it didn't do better because, regardless of whether it's fair or not, if you're the lead of a film that does that badly, you get attached to that sort of stigma, right? Right. This person can't carry a movie, even though clearly he can because he carried American Assassin, which did better than this film and did pretty well. So clearly that's not accurate, but, that's the business.
Well, I was about to say, we're still living in a time where Shrek 2 was re-screened this past weekend in theaters. It was the third highest movie. So the film industry, in a lot of ways, has never recovered. It may never recover.
Well, you know what? I look at it a little bit differently. I love the fact that we're getting all of these theatrical re-releases right now.
No, I'm with you.
I think that the film industry is finally discovering the value of their bulk titles.
Right.
And because before you might get one or two substantive re-releases in a year. Now we're getting them like every weekend, right? We've got the Mummy re-release coming up, which I'm going to fucking go to. I haven't seen that movie since 99 when I saw it.
I didn't even know that this was a fucking thing. Now I have to go watch the Mummy in theaters, which I did see in theaters originally, which would be even fucking stranger.
Yeah. But what's great about them is they're doing decent business. Like they're showing up in the top 10 and the top 5. And so like, I think that's actually a path forward to get out of this whole like movie industry's diet. Like, I think that's a good path forward is like rely on your vault titles more. Like they're there for a reason. You put all that work into them. Give them a life. Give them an added life. And so that's exciting. And I would love to see, some of these films that got lost during the pandemic still try to find a home in theaters.
I agree. I agree totally.
And the filmmakers, like not to harp on Duffield too much, but because of all the delays and everything, he had 2 movies come out in 1 year in 2020, and unfortunately, like neither one of them did as good as they should have. I feel like finally people are discovering Underwater is actually a good movie, but
it's amazing.
That's the truth, right? And it's the same. Spontaneous suffered a similar fate because it came out in October of 2020. So we're talking about like a month or two apart from Love and Monsters is when.
Oh, dang. So he had 3 movies that year. Jesus.
Oh, yeah. And Spontaneous is such a great film. Yeah. And I don't know anybody who sees that movie and doesn't fall in love with it.
Right.
And I don't know that was going to be a big commercial hit. But again, it certainly would have done better than what it ended up doing. And so, I think Brian is a perfect example of a lot of people who really got shafted. I think another friend of mine, Bria Grant, who she had her 2 big films, first film as a director, first film as a big screenwriter. They both came out the year that they both premiered at South by the year that South by had to go virtual. And so it was completely robbed of that whole first film experience and such a bummer because you can't get that back.
Can I say I'd be more inclined actually to go see a re-release of a movie I already love than going and seeing a new movie in theaters at this point? Hearing you say The Mummy is coming out or Aliens 40 years is coming out in next week as well, I think even. I'm more excited for that because those are movies I've never been able to, I saw The Mummy on the screen when I was 9 years old. But to your point, the idea of even though it came out during the pandemic, hopefully the tail of the movie extends much longer into the future. And it's you can never say or know what will or won't, but It does. As someone who's a fan of wrestling, wrestling in the film industry had the same problem, which is you have people who are making movies that then they're being thrown into a camp, which is your movie was not successful because people just couldn't go see it because of the pandemic. And the same thing happened in wrestling. There were wrestlers that were booked as the champion that it was then viewed poorly that they weren't making enough money. That's only because the pandemic was happening. That the pandemic is such a weird thing that we're still so close to it. We're going to have to continue to make apologies for it. But a movie like Love and Monsters really took a hit because of it. Because most movies that came out in 2020, I don't know how many people were really engaging with movies the way they wanted to in 2020.
Oh, sure. And I will say one actor who did not have that issue though was Dylan Baker, because Dylan Baker did not have any films come out during the pandemic, was just doing television, did that great Amazon series Hunters. Well, it was good for the first season. And then did the series Evil, which not near enough people love and appreciate the way they should. And is only now starting to have more, films come out post-pandemic. But just to tie it back to our other Dylan.
The original Dylan.
But if you haven't seen Love and Monsters, boy, oh boy, I really recommend you see it. I think it's a really special film. I think it's got something for everybody. It is what I call a complete entertainment.
Chris, you've seen one Dylan O'Brien. I'm going to mess up the name now because we're doing 2 in one episode. You've seen one Dylan O'Brien film. So what do you think is the foundational title? The one you've seen.
Well, and that's the thing. Billy Ray already mentioned it. I actually found American Assassin to be a fun movie. I went and saw it in theaters. I didn't even do an episode on it. I just went and saw it because, I can tell you why I went and saw it. I went and saw it because it had Michael Keaton in it. That's why. Sure. Michael Keaton, who, what's even funnier is 2017 is around the time where Michael Keaton's having his resurgence as an actor too. because if memory serves, 2017 is either the year of or the year before or after Birdman.
Yeah.
I think we're right in there, which I think American Assassin, him being cast at American Assassin was because of Birdman. But
Oh, sure.
I actually think American Assassin's a really fun, interesting movie, and I think Dylan O'Brien is actually really good in it. He can actually stand up to Michael Keaton, who, I mean, obviously is like Michael Keaton is Michael Keaton, and he's a tour de force. But Dylan O'Brien's great. I actually rewatched American Assassin this week, and I was like, this is the fact that this movie doesn't get talked about. I understand, because it does feel a little Jason Bourne adjacent, but I don't know. I feel like there's enough going on within the movie to be like, you should check this out if you're into like spy movies. Again, like, it's such a weird. It's hard to describe what the movie is without saying like it's just kind of like a lot of these other movies that were coming out in the mid-10s. But if you're into like well-made action movies from the mid-10s to teens, like this movie, right up your alley. And Dylan O'Brien's great, and as Taylor Kitsch too, who I'm kind of low-key a fan of, because for the most part,
I love Taylor Kitsch. I'm a Friday Night Lights stan all day long, and big Tim Riggins fan over here.
I like Taylor Kitsch as a David Koresh. I thought that was inspired casting. But American Assassin's worth checking out for sure.
Oh no, I love American Assassin. Like, straight up, I think it's interesting because like originally they were like it was going to be like Gerard Butler or Colin Farrell in this role, and then they decided to go back to the very beginning of the book series and start out when he was younger, which I think was a really good decision. And yeah, Dylan O'Brien's great here. Like this was his first role after the accident.
Right.
Like, this was his first time doing something after the accident. And you can tell, right? Like, he has this, like, world weariness to him in this movie that he has not had in previous films, is a little more haggard looking at times. And it's like, clearly that was a choice to have him look like that. But also, like, dude just almost died. So, like, he's pulling on some, basically this is about his girlfriend is killed in this shooting. And then so he kind of goes on the warpath, trying to go after these people. Michael Keaton plays his CIA handler, and a great Sanaa Lathan is also in this, who does not get near enough leading roles. She's really great in this as the CIA director. Like equips himself of like the action lead really, really well, and to the point where I'm like, why have we not seen more of this since then? Because it felt like it would have been, and maybe it's just because he doesn't want to get pigeonholed. But I'm a big fan of this film, and this film did decently, and it had a similar budget to Love and Monsters, made like almost $70 million at the box office. Like, did decent for a film like this, for a film that most people don't remember.
Yeah, I would assume most people didn't see this movie, which is a shame because we didn't get a sequel, even though they set it up at the end of the movie for more stuff, because this is again based off of a book series as well. I can't recommend this movie enough. And to your point, I think if we're talking just holistically about Dylan O'Brien, it's a good vehicle for him as an actor as well.
Oh, and you also, let's be clear, you also get Scott Adkins in a small role. So when do you not love a good Scott Adkins appearance?
Fair.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've been talking about American Assassin for a little while, our second question, Billy Ray, could you recommend a lesser-known title from his filmography, which somebody, if they watched it as their first entry into his filmography, maybe it would potentially turn them off, but it's actually a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah, that's another interesting one too, because I'll be honest, like, I don't think he has a lot of movies that would turn someone off. Like, for the most part, he makes pretty populist movies. Like, they're movies that are going to be generally appealing to folks.
Yep.
So I'm gonna highlight a movie, and this is not a movie, by the way, that I think is one of his best. So I don't want that to be what I'm asserting here, but it is a unique project in his filmography. It is a film called Flashback. And this is a film from 2020. It also came out during the pandemic. It was originally called, I believe, The Education of Frederick Fitzel was the original title, but they changed it to Flashback. And it's a weird, like, time-hoppy, he meets this guy that he knew when he was younger, but then there's this whole question of, does this person really exist, and what is reality? and it's like this journey through time and memory, and like it's a really bizarre film, and it doesn't all work, and it doesn't all. You see what they're going for. You understand what they're going for. They just don't quite know how to put all the pieces together. But it's got Hannah Gross, Micah Monroe is the main the female lead of the film, and it just kind of came and went, right? It didn't even get a theatrical release. It went straight to I think it went straight to VOD and physical media. Just immediately is what it went to. And I see why. Like, it doesn't have the appeal, but it's different in his filmography. He doesn't do a lot of these like weird. He does indie movies, but he doesn't do a lot of these like weird, like really out there indie movies, right? Like, this is a different sort of thing because he's playing the lead guy. It's clearly like a Jacob's Ladder inspired sort of psychological thriller. You don't see him doing a lot of that stuff. And maybe for good reason. I don't think Flashback necessarily works in a lot of ways. But it's the only film in his filmography that I'm like, I think there's merit there, and it might turn some people off.
And it's a Christopher McBride movie. I enjoy The Conspiracy a whole lot. That's
fair. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a weird movie. Like, that's a weird, fun movie. So I would actually be curious to check this movie out because that Conspiracy's found footage. This movie is clearly not a found footage film.
No, it's not. And look, it's like, it's got all the things, right? It's shot well. It's well acted. Like, it's just the story where things get a little muddy. And yeah, I don't think it's certainly not a film without merit. It's certainly a film that has interesting ideas and is doing some things well, but is never going to be like, it's never going to become a cult classic. It's not got that vibe to it.
I am very intrigued by this one, even though you say it doesn't work. It sounds rather fun.
No, it doesn't work. That said, like, is it a movie that I'll watch again? Sure. Like, it's not like it maybe doesn't work all the way, but it's got enough value to it. I mean, it's got like, it's at 55% on Rotten Tomatoes. So like, it's not at the bottom. It's not the Drex.
Yeah, and Micah Monroe, I mean, that's a big selling point too.
Yeah,
especially for fans of It Follows.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's good. It makes me want to see him in more horror. It's not a straight up horror film, but it's got horror elements. I would love to see Dylan O'Brien because he's never really done a straight up horror film. So it'd be interesting to see that. He's got a movie coming out that M. Night Shyamalan produced, which I think might be horror. But it also might just be more of a mystery thriller. So,
got it. I thought it was that one that the trailer just came out for, and that, not to date the episode necessarily, but that.
No, not his daughter's movie or Trap. No, but it's just something that he's producing. It's been on the development or it's been shot for a while, so it just hasn't been released yet. But we'll see. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be. But maybe he didn't. Maybe he's staying away from horror intentionally. He did start out doing a horror series, so maybe he's just wanting to stay away from the genre for a while. Makes sense.
That's a good call.
Makes total sense. Now, on the other side of that, our other Dylan side, when we're talking about titles that I think describe to me the parameters again.
Basically, it's something we covered a good entry point, something that's not necessarily a great entry point for the actor that we're talking about, but still one that's a great film.
I want to go Catfight. I'm going to go cat. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to go Catfight. I'm going to go Applesauce. I'm going to go the movie Applesauce. I think that is the movie that. Oh wow! Has anybody here seen Applesauce?
I have not.
Okay, so Applesauce is a wild movie. It's from director Oner Tekel, who has done a lot of. He's like a weird, wild, crazy New York filmmaker, very Woody Allen-esque, but very like heightened genre stuff. We actually world premiered his new film Pound Cake at Make Believe last year. But Dylan O'Brien basically plays this DJ. The whole plot is about a man who calls into this talk show hosted by Dylan O'Brien. He confesses.
Dylan Baker, you're doing it now.
Yeah, Dylan Baker. And then body parts start showing up at his house. Someone starts sending him random body parts. So he's like, his life's unraveling. He's trying to figure it out. Dylan O'Brien is this radio host who kind of is almost like the narrator, but also sort of like the Dylan Baker. This is the dominant presence. And so it's just an odd movie. It's a weird movie. Not everybody is going to get down with it. It is out there. It goes for it. But Dylan Baker is really good. And this was Dylan Baker's introduction to the world of Odor to Kill. He's done other films with him. It's a baker's dozen.
It's a baker's delight, one might say.
One might say it's a baker's delight. So I would say for Dylan O'Brien, it's flashback. For Dylan Baker, it is applesauce.
I don't have an answer for Dylan O'Brien, but for Dylan Baker, I actually put a movie that I really resonate with a lot, which is Revolutionary Road.
Sure.
Sam Mendes, great movie. I mean, Dylan Baker's in it, but he's not a main character, but sure. I mean, I don't know. I still think it's funny that Dylan Baker almost was, if there had been a fourth Spider-Man movie, he would have been the Lizard. What a weird universe that we have Dylan Baker playing a massive movie villain in a massive film franchise directed by Sam Raimi. We never got it, which is a shame, but maybe Dylan O'Brien could play Dr. Kirk Connors in the new Spider-Man movies. Wouldn't that be something?
I have no doubt that Dylan O'Brien can play anything he wants. Absolutely could.
I'm just now thinking, like, what do we even title this episode?
Hilarious. That's what we title it.
Double Dylan.
Double Dylan all the way. Double D's.
Double Dylan all the way, baby.
All right. Let's get into some of the bigger impact of the Dylans. Oh gosh. Sure. What is the biggest impact that Dylan O'Brien has had on pop culture as a whole? And again, this doesn't have to be like a film specifically. It can be anything philosophical. It can be like inspiring a generation, or it genuinely could be a film. Like, what do you think his impact has had the biggest hand in?
Well, it's interesting because I don't know that Dylan O'Brien has a lot of cultural impact, honestly. Like, he's got a huge fan base, and that's super important. But like cultural impact, I don't know. What I will say is what I think he has perfected is the art of the himbo. He is a phenomenal himbo. And I think back to his early work in like The First Time or The Internship, but mostly he did this film in 2022 called Not Okay, which starred Zoe Deutsch, and he starred in it as well. And it is the beginning of that, where he's basically playing this very like, what's the right word? Like the culturally appropriating white guy. And then he followed that up with a film which really went under the radar. It's a mockumentary called Maximum Truth, which stars Ike Barinholtz, about this sort of like political campaign wheeler dealer in his own mind. And Dylan O'Brien plays this like social media guy who helps him out, where in that movie, you will never see a better himbo. In your life, you will never see a better himbo than Dylan O'Brien in Maximum Truth. And so for me, that's the big thing, is I think he really has just perfected that particular type of role in those three films, to the point where I don't think he ever needs to even do it again. But like, he's done such a great job with it so far. And Maximum Truth, I will say, like, Not Okay, I think is a really solid film. It's got some interesting things to say. Maximum Truth is kind of a disaster and is only saved by the fact that he and Ike Barinholtz are working overtime to make that script work. But you might still get some, if you're a Dylan O'Brien completist, certainly check it out. If you're not, you can skip it. But I would say, for Dylan O'Brien, hasn't been changing the world, but in terms of himbos, has really been getting the word out.
Ike Barinholtz does not get enough love. I definitely wanted to shout that out.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I was just going to say, so Dylan Baker is different, right? Like, in the sense of, I credit Dylan Baker alongside folks like Philip Seymour Hoffman, right? The people who were around the same time, who sort of made it okay to be unlikable and despicable in movies. And obviously Philip Seymour Hoffman had a bigger career and a bigger place in that. But it goes back to Happiness, right? Like Happiness is the example because that is a film where you are not supposed to like anyone. There is no one in that film that is even remotely likable. And yet you're still interested in them. You're still following them. Like you're still captivated by them. And Dylan Baker is that perfect example. Like I said earlier, he plays an unremorseful, unrelenting pedophile. And they don't shy away from it. They're not excusing it, but they're also not, they're just painting it as it is. And there's this really uncomfortable scene in that movie where he is having a conversation with his son. And his son asks him, if I weren't your son, would you have tried something like that with me? And he says, yes. I'm like, that's horrifying and harrowing. And that is really what set Dylan Baker up as this very particular type of character actor. And we see it, and it's not all he's done, right? Like we said earlier, like he was in the Spider-Man franchise. He's clearly not typecast as those things, but I think he gave a lot of actors permission. And the same way a lot of these Todd Solondz actors did to just like, you can go for the crazy shit. You can go for the hard to watch shit and still make it work. And I think he's been doing that his whole career as a character actor. I think he's one of the most reliable character actors that there is. I think about his work in Hunters, that Amazon series where he plays an unrelenting Nazi. And that opening scene of that series is like, what?
So amazing.
And only Dylan Baker can do that. I feel like only Dylan Baker can get away with that. Like, who else would have done that? I don't know. Like, Dylan Baker is is my first thought. But like, yeah, it does throughout his career. But I think he has really elevated the character actor game. I would say that is something, and not just him. Like we got a lot of other great character actors who've done it, but I would certainly put him in the Mount Rushmore of those.
Something about the way he smiles, it always it could either be sinister or not. Yeah. I think of Trick or Treat, a movie that I'm not really a huge fan of, but he's great. He's great in it. Well, I have a long and storied history with that director, so we'll just leave it at that. If you want to hear more about that story, I forget which episode I tell the story on, but
I don't know that I need to hear that.
It's funny. It's funny. Let's go listen to our horror anthology.
I like Mike, so I don't know if that's a good story. But yeah, it's interesting. Like just looking at his filmography, and what you said is so true. Like he can go from playing like the worst, most repugnant pedophile in the world to playing like a normal suburban dad and give the exact same kind of performance in both, but it'd be completely different. Like just with like, he's just really good at absorbing the story and the writing of whatever he's given and then just like putting it out and with just subtle changes. He can go from one to the other with just subtle changes. And he knows exactly what he's doing at this point. And he plays into it sometimes. Like sometimes he'll be playing a role and you're like, okay, you're really just buying into this caricature of yourself. But then sometimes he'll come out with something like totally entirely different. Like he's got a new movie out right now. It's called Leroy, Texas, which stars Steve Zahn. And he plays a hitman. And it's a very interesting take on a hitman role, like very different than any kind of hitman you've seen before. And like he's just really great at that. He's really great at taking those roles and just injecting something slightly different into it.
Well said. Character actors are always fun to talk about, and the amount of like great ones we've had that still don't get respect is always infuriating.
Yeah, I've always said that Dylan Baker is like William H. Macy with no fucks to give.
Yeah,
they're similar. They're similar actor types. They probably each one's lost out to the other on countless roles over the years. I would guarantee you. William H. Macy gets more of the prestige and more of the like, oh, it's William H. Macy, but we're talking about very tiny differences in them as performers, right? Yeah. I feel like the types of roles that Dylan Baker will play, William H. Macy would never play.
I would agree with that. And William H. Macy, also the Coen brothers guy, too. There's a little bit of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah.
So I'm curious after what you just said, looking at the William H. Macy filmography, which of his films would you have rather seen Dylan Baker play the role?
Ooh, that is a really interesting question. Okay, I'll play this game. I'll play this game. I would say I'm just scrolling through here right now and looking at sort of. Interesting. I will say for me, God, there's so many. There's so many options where I could see him doing it. It's like, which one do I want him to do though, right? Because like clearly not Fargo. Like clearly Fargo is William H. Macy. We don't.
Right.
No one wants to see Dylan Baker in that. I'll give an answer, and this is a really outside there answer. Jurassic Park 3.
I figured he was going to say that. I was like, please say Jurassic Park 3. Please say Jurassic Park 3.
I don't dislike William H. Macy in Jurassic Park 3. I just think Dylan O'Brien would have been, or Dylan Baker would have been an interesting choice for that. I think he would have been an interesting choice for that. I could also say maybe, there's some later stuff that I don't really feel like he's in Ricky Stenicki. Like that would have been fun to see Dylan Baker play that role, but it's William H. Macy. Once I see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I'll tell you if that's one that we could do. But yeah, that'd be the answer.
Jurassic Park's a good pull. It's part 3 is not great, and I think it would have been more interesting with Dylan Baker.
Part 3 has one of the funniest scenes in all the Jurassic Park movies where a velociraptor literally goes, Alan. It's the funniest part of all of those movies. It was for the trailer and nothing else because it makes no sense in the movie. But I love that they got a trailer shot of a velociraptor in an airplane, and there was like, whoa, what is this? Oh, it's just a dream sequence. Okay, never mind.
I have a fondness for Jurassic Park 3. It's certainly not. It's certainly not as bad as I would say any of the Jurassic World films, personally.
Correct. Agreed.
All three garbage. But I think it's got its qualities. I don't think Joe Johnston knows how to make a bad movie. Like, they don't all work. I mean, I would argue Wolfman is kind of a bad movie, but he kind of came in to save that movie. So I don't blame him as much as I don't even blame Mark Romanok. I just blame the whole system. But like, I don't think he knows how to make a bad movie. So it's like Jurassic Park 3, I think it's got its charms. I think it's a fun adventure movie. I don't think it does anything new, but I do think Tia Leone and William H. Macy are interesting characters. I think having Sam Neill back in this movie is way better than having him back in Jurassic World Dominion, which is wasted.
No, they're all wasted in Dominion. Everybody, including the original series actors, and then the actors from Jurassic World as well. Everybody and then it's about locusts, guys. It's not even about dinosaurs. It's about locusts.
And I don't want to make this a Jurassic Park episode, clearly, but what I will say is, like, I almost walked out of Jurassic World the first time I saw it. Me and my buddy we almost walked out because I'm a huge fan of that original film. And it just felt like it was the cheapest, worst form of lip service. And it bothered me so bad. But we stayed, we watched it. I did not care for the movie. I'll be honest, watched it a few years later, didn't hate it as much, but still was not a fan. Then came Fallen Kingdom, which is from one of my absolute favorite filmmakers. I'm a massive J.A. Bayona fan. And I think the first half of that film is borderline unwatchable. And I think the second half, when it turns into ostensibly a haunted house movie, is really effective. And if that whole movie had been a haunted house movie, maybe the second best Jurassic movie ever made. Jurassic World Dominion, I think, is one of the worst films I've ever seen in the theater.
I think Fallen Kingdom is the third best Jurassic Park movie.
It is, just for that last half.
Yeah.
Jurassic World Dominion is absolute garbage. Colin Trevorrow does not need to be allowed to direct movies anymore.
Wow.
You had your chance. You fucked up too many times. Go produce television and leave movies alone. And the fact that they're working on a new fucking Jurassic Park movie
already
is insane to me. Why did I read something like Scarlett Johansson? Did I read bullshit? Or it's like,
no, you
Scarlett Johansson, Dev Patel.
That's it. And I'm like,
Gareth Edwards directing.
Like, I like Gareth Edwards. Don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem with Gareth Edwards directing it. And I think there's stuff to like about the creator. But, like, why do we need this right now? Like, stop. Give it a break. Like, take a fucking break.
It's
Like,
become
we
the
know-
Spider-Man of the franchise world all of a sudden. Like, really? Another Jurassic Park
Do
movie?
people really want this? I guess so. These movies keep making an obscene amount of money. So, like, maybe there is a market for them. I am not that market. I do not want another fucking Jurassic anything. Give it 10 years and then maybe we can talk. But
I only hope it's the rumored human dinosaur hybrid storyline, because if that's what it is, I'm game. Give me something fucking weird.
Well,
'Cause that was always the rumor for like
in the
decades.
hands of Gareth Edwards, that could be really interesting.
Right.
He plays a lot in his films about human hybrids, and like that would be an interesting director to hand that off to. I wouldn't be as anti that as possible. That said, they gave a movie to J.A. Boyona. They tied his hands behind his back every step of the way, and what we got was Fallen Kingdom. And so, they didn't have the courage to let him make his movie, and so he compromised. And it's like, that's not my biggest thing with anything in general. Don't bring in these like really creative, visionary guys and then not let them do their thing. Otherwise, why do you want them? You could get any fucking music video director on the planet to do exactly what you want them to do. And don't get somebody like him and be like, okay, but by the way, you can't do this, this, and this. It's like, no, like, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that to my boy, J.A.
And to bring it all the way back to Jurassic Park and Dylan Baker and William H. Macy, speaking of a director whose hands were tied behind his back when he made a Marvel film, Joe Johnston, which I still concede The Rocketeer was the framework for First Avenger, and Marvel did not let him do his own thing on that movie either.
That said, I still think it's a pretty damn successful movie. Like, First Avenger, I still think is one of the better Marvel movies.
Better than the first Thor movie, that's for sure.
And it's like, so I have a soft spot for that film. I do, and it feels like a Joe Johnston movie. Even with everything that happened, like, it feels like a Joe Johnston movie. And like, I know it's weird to say that, and people might fight back on it, but like, you think about Rocketeer, you think about Jurassic World 3, you think about all these other Joe Johnston, Mighty Joe Young, stuff like that. They all feel like a Joe Johnston movie. And not a lot of filmmakers, because he's not someone who is considered an auteur. He's not someone who's considered like, you wouldn't have Joe Johnston listed as one of like the top, but like they all feel like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Jumanji. Like they all feel like Joe Johnston movies. He does not get enough credit for like what he has done for film in terms of like adventure films. Like when I think of adventure films, the first person I think of is Joe Johnston. Every time.
Same. Or my favorite, speaking of The Mummy, Stephen Sommers.
That's a great adventure film. Top 5 adventure films, I would say. It's really good.
Yeah.
But yeah. So those would be my responses to the questions on the Dylans.
Well, then let's build a cinematic bridge to the Dylans. What do you think is something that somebody else could see that they're a fan of already if they've never seen a Dylan O'Brien movie that would indicate that they might like to jump into that filmography? Well,
clearly Teen Wolf, right? Like if you are, but I'll go on a little broader sense there. If you're a fan of, because this was my route to him. So, right. So I would say follow my exact route. If you're a fan of like the teen dramas, the teen supernatural shows like Riverdale and shit like that, like OC, anything like that, give Teen Wolf a shot. I guarantee you it is, because people think Teen Wolf, they think, oh, it's an MTV show and it's this and it's that. And it's like, I understand, but it is so much better than it has any right to be. And it is so much better than you would ever think it would be because of all the things you come in with. So you're going to be pleasantly surprised. You're just going to be. And I've rewatched this series like 4 times at this point. And like I rewatched it for the last time leading up to when they did the Teen Wolf movie, which is frankly not great. But don't let that take you off the series. The series is really, really well done. It is it's all about the guiding hand, right? It's all about the people who are behind it. And basically it's Russell Mulcahy is the driving force behind that series. And Russell Mulcahy, people might know from like directed Pitch Black and directed Highlander 2 and like he's been a filmmaking force for a while, and he is really the guiding hand of Teen Wolf. And it's so necessary. So if you're a fan of that, if you're a fan of like these kind of shows and it takes you to Teen Wolf, I can't imagine you're not going to be interested in seeing what else Dylan O'Brien's doing, because he is the standout from that show. Like clearly the standout, not only in the fact that he's gone on to have the biggest career by far of everybody in that show, but it's just obvious. It's just obvious when you watch it that like, there are a lot of really good actors, but he's the star. And so I would say that for Dylan O'Brien, I would say, Dylan Baker is a little more difficult to say, like, what would be like the thing that would get you into him. I would honestly say, oh boy, it's so hard, but I'm going to go back to a TV show as well, because I think TV is good gateway to film stuff for a lot of people, and more people, and people start out on TV. So I would say The Good Wife. I was a huge fan of The Good Wife, and he plays a really interesting character on that show over, I think, about 10 episodes, where he plays this like obvious killer that everybody knows is the killer. He knows he's the killer. He knows everybody knows he's the killer, but he always finds a way to get off. And so it's this very interesting, it's kind of like 8 to 10 episode arc that he plays on that show. I would also point out he has a really great arc, similar number of episodes on The Americans. And if you're a fan of those shows, or any of those shows, like, that's a good gateway for Dylan Baker, I think, because he's bringing the same stuff to it, whether it's a TV show or a film, just different medium. But part of the problem with trying to pinpoint him that way is his filmography is so diverse. Like, he's done everything. Like, he does character roles in like crime movies and dramas, but he does Marvel, and he does comedies, and he does everything, right? And so, or maybe on just a broader sense, if you're just a fan of like weird character actors, like, there's no one better. There's no one better. Like, he's, the Mount Rushmore for me of character actors, he's definitely on there. J.T. Walsh is on there. Who else? Who are some great character actors? Like, I've got weird ones, like outliers, like James Rebhorn and things like that I would probably put on there. But like, he's for sure on there. Like, there's no one like him. There's no character actor like Dylan Baker.
You brought up some of his TV stuff, and I was thinking about this the other day when Chris and I were talking about the Dylan O'Brien misunderstanding. I am kind of shocked that we never got Dylan Baker as like a white-collar criminal on an episode of The Shield. I feel like he would have fit in there perfectly. Well,
and the other show that I didn't mention was, because his big break was really Murder One, the series in the mid-90s. And he was on that series. He was on there. I think he was a regular. I think he was a series regular. If he wasn't a credited person. But that's where he did his crime procedural work, was in that show as Detective Polson. But like, he shows up, like, he's one of those actors, like, he showed up for 5 episodes of Law and Order. He showed up for 12 episodes of Kings, and he's on, like I said, The Good Wife. He's on Damages for a season. Like, he shows up for these like huge arcs on these TV shows. And he's great. He's always great. He's never not great. You're never going to find a bad Dylan Baker performance. It's literally not possible.
I have an answer for the Dylan Baker side, but not for the Dylan O'Brien side. And it's someone that I think in a lot of ways, like, he as an actor has that same feel to him, where he could play sinister or caring, and it's very much like riding the razor's edge. John Lithgow.
Oh.
And to go even further, I'm actually surprised Dexter never had Dylan Baker on the show, because he would have been a perfect, like, he actually would have been, if you had taken John Lithgow out of the 4th season of the show and replaced him with Dylan Baker, I think it would have worked still as well, because again, he has that family man vibe to him, but there could be a secret underneath the surface. And John Lithgow does that great, because he's very menacing, but also can be very charming. Same with Dylan Baker. So I would say, if you're a fan of John Lithgow's stuff, definitely check out Dylan Baker's kind of body of work.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison, for sure. I think that definitely works.
Well, we did it. We answered all the questions about everything. We got it. We did the Dylans. We did the double Dylan thing. This, first off, maybe the funniest episode yet.
It just felt right. It felt right, since we had already established that Dylan Baker was looming over the episode.
It was brilliant.
Right. And now that I've been talking about it more and more, I'm like, cast Dylan Baker as Dylan O'Brien's dad in something. Let's get some double Dylan action going. It works. They look enough alike. It was totally feasible. And also, like, and let me just also be clear, I want another Dylan Baker in a Todd Solondz film. Like, that's what I want. And Todd Lawrence has not made a movie in a while. I know he's got one coming out that he's been working on. Let's find out. Well, maybe it worked because I thought he had like when he made a deal with like A24 or something for like a new film, but I could be wrong. Oh wait, no, okay, I'm not wrong. Yeah, it's Love Child is the name of this movie. An 11-year-old boy schemes to reshape his mother's love life in disastrous consequences, and it is Elizabeth Olsen and Charles Melton so far, which is interesting. But yeah, I want to see another Dylan Baker and a Todd Solondz movie because I just love Todd Solondz. He's one of my absolute favorite filmmakers.
Oh yeah,
hasn't made a movie in 8 years, which is a fucking travesty. Dude should be getting. I get it. His stuff is out there. It's weird. It's hard to. It's not palatable for everyone. But
I mean, we're in the period of weird. I mean, look at
I know
more things. There's so many things that are coming out that are finally pushing some of those boundaries of what was expected. And I would be all about a Salons-a-Sance. Like, I mean, first off, the big thing is all the classics. Get those out on physical media. People have been begging for that for years. And supposedly Happiness was coming to Criterion like 5 years ago. Come on, do something about it already.
Well, his 4-film streak there it was Welcome to the Dollhouse, Happiness, Storytelling, and Palindromes.
Yeah,
it's such a wild series of filmmaking adventures. Like Palindromes is a hard movie to watch. Like to the fact you watch it and you're like, when you've got a scene where you've got a woman walking through all of these like aborted fetuses that have been dropped in a landfill. Like we're talking about like hard shit and like nobody's doing that. Nobody does shit like that. And yeah, I just love Todd Solondz. I wish he was. He's very similar to somebody like a Terry Zwigoff to me, right? Like they to me share a lot of DNA. Even Harmony Korine, I would throw in there to a degree. All filmmakers, I would love to see more stuff from. I did watch Harmony Korine's new movie, Aggro Drift, and it is wild. And I don't know if it works, but it's wild.
My friend went to that whole strip club premiere thing. Did you go to that?
No. I did not go to the strip club premiere. I got a screener for the festival, so I watched it on my screen at home. But 99% of people who see it are going to hate it.
Yep.
But the 1% are going to go ape shit for it. Like I was the 1% of beach bum, so I get it.
Oh man, this has been really fun on an episode that we can talk about from Beach Bum to Twilight to Jurassic World Dominion to Happiness.
Well, and now we have protocol set, so we know that every time I come on, we're going to talk about 2 actors with the same name.
Maybe next time it'll be directors or two very opposite microgenres or something like that.
Well, we could do something. What's his name? We can do like a Alfred Hitchcock, Alfred Molina double feature. Molina and Hitchcock.
I love it. Billy Ray, and if somebody wanted to go hear more of you, you already mentioned a lot of it, but what's the one thing that you would say people should go check out first?
Oh, goodness, that's hard. I would say, obviously Screen Drafts. Like if you're not a Screen Drafts listener, I would encourage you to become one and join the Patreon because I promise you there is no more active Patreon around than on the Screen Drafts Patreon. So I would say definitely go support those guys and therefore support me in the process because you're going to be hearing a lot of me on that podcast coming up. And, other than that, I would just direct people to I don't even know. Like I have stuff that people can go check out, but it's just go listen to all my old shit. If you like, go listen to The Incinerator, go listen to movie mixtapes, go listen to that stuff, but mostly go listen to Screen Drafts.
Chris, what about yourself?
WeirdingWayMedia.com is where you can find everything that I work on except for one thing, which can be found over at my Patreon or Mike White's Patreon. That is Projection Booth and Culturecast, respectively, and that's Rankin' on Bond, where we talk about James Bond once a month with our dear friend Mr. Richard Haddam from Richard Haddam's Paranormal Bookshelf. So if that's something that you're into and you want to hear, which if you're listening to this, you might, go on over to WeirdingWayMedia.com. What about you, Ryan?
I would say check out Someone's Favorite Productions. With Billy Ray being here, I got to highlight the fact that The one that has been currently released, Billy Ray wrote a really great piece with me on a film that was called What Happens Next Will Scare You. It is a horror anthology. We covered underappreciated segments from horror anthology films, and I really appreciate it, and it's a super stellar release. So TerraVision put that out back in, I think, November of 2023 or January, something like that. And I think people would love it. It's a fun one, but Someone's Favorite Productions.com. Billy Ray, thanks again for doing this.
No, it was my pleasure. Have me back anytime.
Of course. As usual, with today specifically, with so many film tangents, we hope that it's inspired you to check out something new. You look at our next episode and that you continue to push the boundaries.